All right. So for today's Control and Prevent session today, we're going to from Cella Technologies. This is our opportunity to learn a little bit more about advanced inventory management, learn about the Cella product in general. So with that being said, Jason and floor is yours and control. So
Yeah, we're having a hard time hearing you, Kevin, but I think I'll get started. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Cool. Again, thanks to Control+M, our partners, to helping us get a chance to present to everybody. Really excited to kind of go through at a high level what we do at Cella. I'm Jason Prater. I'm co-founder and CEO at Cella. We just passed our 6-year anniversary. Barnett Black's on the phone as well. He's our co-founder as well. Oops, you just stopped sharing screens, Kevin. And just a little bit about me. Before co-founding Cella, I worked at Plex for a long time, for 18 years roughly as an engineer, product leader, that whole process. Before that, I was actually a materials manager working for my dad. So a lot of background, really excited to kind of take everyone through it. Now, if this works right, I should be able to. Oops, I went to the end. Is this the right presentation?
Jason, if
do you want me to share?
Yeah, I just had the title slide, so yeah.
Okay. Let me share. I had it all queued up, ready to go.
And while Jason's going through everything today, I'll be monitoring chat. So if there's any questions, I'll make sure that I bring those up to Jason. We also have a section at the end, but we want this to, if there's any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to toss them in the chat.
There we go. Perfect. All right, let's get going. So yeah, a little bit about, we're going to cover today just a little bit about us. What do we do specifically for our Plex customers, how we extend their Plex investment. A quick overview of some of the more popular tools that we offer, share a little bit about our customer success, and then have it open for questions. As Marty said, if anything comes up where you're like have a question or want to really dive into a topic, please just start in the chat and Marty will bring it up so we can answer that and take care of that as fast as possible. We don't have to wait till the end. I don't want to sit here on a soapbox. It's much more about the interaction. That's where I really enjoy the kind of interaction. Okay. So who is Cella? And I always like to think about this in a couple different phrases. And the first and foremost is we are Plex's warehouse management and advanced inventory solution partner. We've been a Plex partner for several years now, and we are their go-to when it comes to WMS. As I mentioned, we have a deep history with manufacturing, distribution, and technology. I actually own my own forklift. It's a Yale 78. But it's really, it's not just me, but the whole team has a deep background in that technology and manufacturing space. And so we try to bring that to the table whenever we present our solutions. We are focused on warehouse and inventory management. You know, it's really our core tenet is just solving those needs. And really, a thing I rant about often in the office is I want to eliminate the physical inventory. I think it's a waste of time. I think having inventory accurate just once a year is not what we want. We want inventory that's accurate year round. So actually run your business, right? As a part of that, actually where we got the name Cella is actually Latin for warehouse. So, and then we are a mobile first philosophy. So inventory is pretty easy to manage if it doesn't move anywhere, right? If it just stays in a corner and no one touches it, it's not going to change much. Much more is the inventory flows, right? Whether it comes in from a supplier, out back and forth to a 3PL, through the production process as it gets consumed, and then eventually out to customers. And that's why all our tools start with a mobile experience first. That's not to say we don't have a lot of web tools as well, but a lot of our tools you'll see today are going to be a lot of our mobile with that idea. And again, it's mobile for the material handler, and then web for typically their supervisor and manager. Just a subset of some of our Plex customers, and really this proof point for us is a couple of different ways we like to present this over and kind of identifies with somebody on this list, right? First of all, we have companies of all sizes, right? Whether they are large multinational automotive suppliers, like American Axle or Thai Summit or Aria, or more niche manufacturers like Irwin and Beta, or even one of our joint projects, Mize products that we did with Kevin. It was a great project he and I did together, who is an electronics and wiring harness manufacturer for lawn and garden and electronics distributor for just about everybody. We kind of cover all those different bases, and a big part of that was we wanted to make the solution scalable. And at the same token, whether it be different geographies or sizes, we also made it so you can kind of pick and choose which tools you need. So some of our customers have the full suite, like in like Irwin or Beta, even Challenge has this in a lot of different facilities. They kind of have deployed almost everything you're going to see today. Other customers like Aria or Thai Summit or even Mize just deploy one or two pieces, right? In Aria's case, it's a label validation process because they were getting dinged from Volkswagen from putting the wrong label on the wrong box. Mize was really focused on picking. That was really their whole process, is picking for production and picking for fulfillment. And so we can kind of control and display that whole functionality, or we can just kind of dial in and solve a specific problem. That's what I love to hear about, is really what's the problem we're trying to solve today and offering the right solution for that. When you look at our suite, we kind of break it down into really 5 major categories. And then we kind of dive into there, right? So first is traditional warehouse management. That's when I talk about put away or picking. A lot of those classic things that you'll see in other systems. Next up is kitting. And for long-time Plexians, just think of it as a structured master unit, both on production side in terms of, hey, I need to bring something to the line, and I don't want to bring them one at a time. I actually want to bring a kit of all the components or a subset of components I need to manufacture. Or the other side of it is, I need a kit to my customers in terms of, I need 2 of these, 3 of these, and 4 of these in a box, and taking them with that whole experience to kind of create those kits. Line replenishment, request management. This is really one of our linchpin tools in terms of how do we provide and keep the line running. This is where I think Plex does a great job of actually running the line, but we really focus on that material handler who's feeding that line, keeping it fed with either parts or components for terminal dunnage or even just material support. Inventory management, that's kind of our catch-all for a lot of our different tools. We really focus on things like, we have a really advanced FIFO control, soon to expand to FIFO. We've got a lot of label validation I mentioned in the previous call. We got safety stock management. Really a lot of any tools, we kind of put it in there. It's more of just inventory that would come up. And then finally, dock management. And that's dealing with the scheduling and coming in and out of trucks. Right now, it's mostly focused on more the customer side or shipping side of trucking, but we're also getting more and more into the supply side as well. You'll see like the common thread that kind of exists between all these is really, we want to manage the inventory as it flows, right? Warehouse management, where does it go? Where do I get it? That kitting, how do I put it together? Line replenishment, keep getting that inventory of the line. You know, it's all that movement. Again, that's why we go with that mobile first platform, is mobile tools for most of these operations that we kind of go through. So a key thing that we wanted to focus on is, I came from Plex. I helped build a lot of the great modules you guys use today. And we wanted to really kind of extend your Plex investment. All of you have made a huge investment into Plex. That was kind of a once in a lifetime, I hope, opportunity for you to kind of go through that experience. And what we want to do is just add capabilities to that without having to change it. So the biggest thing is, our whole focus is a single inventory system. We don't have our own inventory system. We actually just update the Plex one in real time. Same with like put away or picking. We're just applying tools to the existing Plex inventory in real time. And so it kind of lets you have that flow through that whole experience, that whole process, in terms of, one, source of the truth still happens. We just extend it, right? And we'll show you ways we extend that into kind of different operators. So they don't have to learn 2 systems, right? There's a lot of control over that. And so real focus on inventory, labor optimization, and no more catching up Plex to reality. So a couple questions we like to ask of people, like kind of like, how do you identify, right? And how people think about how they would benefit from a WMS. First and foremost, like, do you use a third-party logistics provider? More and more, we're running into customers who have a 3PL. Maybe then they kind of lose sight of that inventory once it hits the 3PL, and kind of don't know what happens after that. And we see that as kind of an opportunity to kind of improve that visibility. Do you have complex bill of materials taking up a lot of space of the line? Which means, are you really, like, space is precious, right? No one wants to build a new facility. It's just ridiculous in this day and age. And so it's how do you squeeze and optimize that space? Do you really enforce FIFO or FIFO for our food customers, right? And how do we enforce that behavior? Because it's one thing to give a report and guide them. And then there's the other ones of like, how do you actually guide them where the oldest inventory is? And then how do you actually enforce it and structure that and make that more flexible and controllable for different work centers or different components? Are you experiencing inventory inaccuracies? And this is always a big question we like to ask. How much are you losing per month? We find that's the easiest because the CFO typically will rattle that off to us within minutes. And we have some customers who started losing hundreds of thousands, and that was just kind of business as normal. We see it as an opportunity to improve that. Are you struggling to hire full and maintain a full materials team? We call it the Amazon effect. We've had 3 companies we know of now that have been wiped out the materials team because Amazon opened up a distribution center across the street, and Amazon's pay scale, every time they would post a raise, Amazon would go $5 above it. It's just a different world. And finally, are you looking for more insight at material handling process? Maybe it's a lot of downtime, maybe it's some of your inaccuracies, maybe it's a hard time keeping the team busy or keeping the team focused on what they need to get done or prioritizing their work, or even highlighting what's going on and who do we need to work with to improve or manage out to a different expectation. So let's talk about how we get there. Like, what is a WMS, right? This is such a globalist word. And so we kind of break it down more in a product base, and really we start the platform that goes underneath it all. So that's our Shop mobile platform. Here's an example of it on a Keyence device. It really runs on any modern Android device. And its whole goal is to give the mobile experience to those users. And so it starts with simple things like, we keep the users logged in for 8 hours. We have a different good beep versus bad beep. We keep the whole experience. We log every single transaction. You'll actually see the analytics driven off of that. We actually disable lasers. So if they scan something and there's an error, if you can't hear it, because a lot of people are deaf like I am, guess what? We turn off the lasers like, oh, I scanned the wrong barcode. Let me acknowledge that and keep going. And then we take that platform and then we add all our products onto it. Like here's some screenshots of put away and for picking and request. But we don't want anyone switching back and forth. And so we actually brought in a lot of Plex functionality as well, like move and cycle and retire. And you can control all that functionality such that you just have to train material handlers in one tool and it does all their Plex transactions behind the scenes. All that data, all that consumption, all that tracking, we kind of analyze it all and put it in a couple of dashboards. And here's a couple I'm going to take one through. So one is our just core transaction dashboard, which is really just looking at what's going on, what is my team up to today, and do the transactions kind of proportionally make sense. That one's a big one for like keeping visibility of operations to see what's going on and see how that works. To the right of that, we kind of get in that history, that historical trend of where are we at compared to our norms, right? So this is actually a customer gave us their permission to share this screenshot, as long as we took out their name. And you see that where they are in the day and how they're averaging around 7,000 transactions per day, right? We also look at the error rate, and that's really important for us. Is we were working with one of our customers, and they hated the whole idea of scanning serial numbers. The materials team just ground against it and said, this isn't going to work for us. This isn't how we run our business, and just really struggled with it. And we went and looked at the analysis, and what it was is they were getting a lot of move errors. Those move errors were caused because they had a part number barcode really close to the container barcode. We added a 1/4 inch difference between the two in the Plex label, and the error rate went from over 10% to less than 1%. And then you went out and talked to the team, right? And they're like, yeah, it's better. They couldn't tell you why. They couldn't crystallize that for us, but having all that data to kind of go through gave us an opportunity with that customer to kind of really have a data-driven continuous improvement process and really kind of drive the result and see the measured improvement. And finally, this customer is a big put away customer, so they want to have their put away metrics up. And so this just shows our puts versus overrides versus errors. And we'll go to more of that when we get to the put away discussion. Another dashboard is one of our favorite ones. This is actually another one for a different customer. And this is one where we're looking at like, hey, give me all the transactions for this group of material handlers. In this case, they've got, I think it's right around 12 material handlers. And we asked them before we started, like, who's your best material handler? And they said, George. I'm like, okay, why? And they couldn't give an answer. He's a great guy, by the way. I'm like, okay. And let's see how that happens. We went in, implemented at this facility our request line replenishment product. Looked at this for about 2 weeks, and then we looked like Eucario is actually number 1 and Jose is number 2. And when you look at Eucario and Jose, what you see is that they're meaningfully ahead of everybody else. I went out and actually talked to them. I'm like, hey, what are they doing more than everybody else? And it's actually Eucario and Jose don't speak English. They're too busy working. They don't have a chance. They don't sit around and talk to their team and colleagues and friends. You know, they're just driving around delivering material all day long. And so while George is a good guy, he's not the best. It's really Eucario. And that's the kind of analytics we provide out of the box. When you track everything, every error, every success, every moment of what a material handler is going through, you kind of you can build a better picture of what's actually going on in their day. So we get the more traditional stuff. We'll get to put away. For us, put away really answers a simple question. I have this box. Where does it go? Right. And so we first start with where does it fit, right? That's dimensions of the containers, the master units, the stack heights, locations. We have all this size data so we can understand little boxes versus big boxes. That's kind of rudimentary. But then we move more and more into rules, and rules are what drive it. When you have a team member, you might have a very simple rule like, hey, all these parts go there, right? And you train them, and maybe even are fortunate enough to have a label hanging up over there that says, 7920s go in this rack. That's very part specific, and there's no enforcement of that. If I'm a material handler and I'm new and I didn't know that there's a rack for that, I just kind of put it wherever I want to. And that's where having the system have a rule like, no, these parts go, this part goes in this specific location or this specific zone in this specific way. Or you can have customer orders like, hey, maybe you have a complex manufacturing process and you have a lot of different products you got to bring together for an order. You can group by orders or shipments or manufacturing dates or by different product types or product groups. You can kind of have all these different rules. And to the material handler, what they really do is they scan a box. We do all the calculation and rule enforcement and then tell them, hey, we think you should move it to this location. In this case, this example is one of our warehouse locations. We then have that user scan that location. And we verify, like, is it one of the recommended lists? If not, we ask the user, are you sure? If they say yes, we let them move it there, but then we log that override and give a bunch of analytics around it. So your team members don't have to know the rules. They just know scan and do what the device tells you to do. And so all these different rules, and we've actually had customers add rules or change rules and not tell their materials team, because the materials team doesn't need to know. Just go scan the box, but whatever it tells you to put the box. And so you kind of get that structure and control, right? And you really get, we think about it, which is how do I make a brand new employee effective with a device and a map, right? And our goal long-term is actually get rid of the map and we'll just give it to them on the device. You get a more process optimization, you get to things like zone balancing and workload balancing to kind of go through the whole process, but it's really about how do you ramp somebody up quickly? How do you get compliance, enforcement, and tracking? And so you can go out there and figure out like, hey, Jason's doing a decent job put aways, Marty's overriding the system too much. Let me go out there with Marty and work out what's going on, right? And one of our graphs we showed earlier, you actually saw a large override peak. We actually called the customer, okay, what's going on? They had a leak in the roof. And so they were telling the team members to ignore the device and move around it for right now while they get the leak repaired. But they have that visibility because of that process. We also get a lot into space utilization based on that. Right now, we help know how big a box is, how much space you have. And so here's one of our customers that uses a 3PL that gets charged by hands and feet, how many people they have in the facility and how much square footage they utilize. And their business is very seasonal, right? They're construction focused business. So their summers are very busy. Their winters are a little bit slower. And so they use this to look at like, here's where we are from a space utilization perspective. Do we need to start adjusting our footprint to more relate to our actual consumption? And start shrinking that footage down so that we can, reap that savings, which is very critical for them. The sister to put away is to pick, right? And to pick is basically telling somebody, like, hey, I need you to get this inventory, right? Whether it be for a customer shipment, it's the most common is, hey, I got fulfillment I got you to take care of. Or, hey, I need you to go schedule for a job and go take care of that. There's a job coming up, I want you to grab components for, right? We've got customers who kind of do both. And it's that similar process. What happens is we beam out to the team. You get to pick the team that goes through it and say, this is the work I need you to do. Here's the order I want you to do it in, and then track them as they go through that activity, right? And so once we give them that activity, we actually find the best container for the demand, whether that be a FIFO or FIFO rule, matching a container type for the customer side. Like, hey, this one, we usually do FIFO, but for this customer, we have a really strict FIFO requirement. So I want our containering requirement. We don't want to repack the material. So just take this container instead. And the most efficient path, we'll actually go through an exercise and map out your warehousing and finished goods and figure out like, oh, the most efficient path, and Kevin and I helped me with this one with Mize, is actually this shelf order in this direction and this shelf order the other direction. They actually had a really wisely laid out facility. We just kind of mimic that in the system. So that you take a new material handler, give them a device, and they're just going to go down that path and work their way through it. We take care of all the inventory transactions. So if you're doing a split, a merge, a build master unit, all that kind of stuff, we do it all automatically with just one scan. We manage who does that work and how much they're effective at, and again, you get that compliance enforcement and tracking. And so that's a big one when it comes to picking, is that if I have a very specific customer need, whether it be a Walmart or Toyota, I don't want my team kind of freewheeling out there. I want them to grab the right material and kind of guide them through that process to go grab it and be successful, and then know when they don't follow that process, so I can go reinforce that with them. We also have alerting on picking, where you can say, I'm having a problem either with the pick itself, that the quantity is like, hey, Plex says there's 10 in here, but I only have 5 in the box. Or there's some other problem, you can skip a step and notify your supervisor. They can come out and work with you to figure out what's wrong. Because most of the time the pickers can't fix it. They need somebody else to. And this is a great way to let them know this is what's going on. And here's a snapshot of one of our analytics, right? It's that viewpoint of how much they're picking. In this case, I actually called them like, why is Tammy so low? She's usually #1 performer. It was because they switched her and Ian for a day. They wanted to see how Ian compared to Tammy and compare those weeks to week. You're going to get that kind of fulfillment and visibility right out of the box. We don't have to do anything. Any questions so far? Well, let's keep this train going then. Kitting, and really kitting is, if you think about it as a recipe or a configuration that adds structure to what is in a master unit. And so it's not so much when you're doing a standard pallet of 10 containers of the same part over and over again. It's much more about like, hey, this time I have 2 of these, 1 of those, 3 of these, 4 of these, packaged in this specific order in a box, either for the line or to ship out. We walk that material handlers through that whole process. And then we actually we have 2 different scheduling methodologies, either picking up off the dispatch list or request to kind of drive it through what it's needed for the work center, and then customer shipments for that side. So over here on the right, it's a snapshot of that. Right? It's a kit number, and that can be either on a barcode they scan or through a request that tells them what it is, the master unit that we're building on the fly, and then what's underneath the serial number, but what's needed for the part numbers, how much are available, and what are we doing as we scan those. What's great is we have like the easy things. Like our whole vision is that a material handler should never get off a forklift. So from here, you can actually hit search on a component, and it'll tell you of the available 13 or 10, excuse me, where are they at? And list those in FIFO order, so they can go grab the oldest container and go find those right from the device, right? They don't have to go off, go find a computer, type something in, or go ask the supervisor, hey, Sue, where do I need to go? We take them all the way through that whole process and create that, including the labeling at the end. And then we have different ways to build those kits. That's what the left is showing. Like we have either part-specific configurations, not part-specific configurations. There's a million different ways to configure it. We have one customer who has literally 4 parts per kit. Another customer has 350 parts per kit. And so you kind of have that range. It's much more about the use case. The ones doing 350 parts per kit only do a couple a day. The ones doing 4 parts a day do literally thousands per day. It's really that kind of understanding what that is, just guiding them through that process so they can make it as efficient as possible. So how do we tell them what to do? How do we tell material handlers? We talked about put away, we talked about picking, we talked about kitting. Our really most common product is our request management, right? And this is one where it really kind of drives the warehouse in terms of, or the material handlers on what they need to do. And so what happens is we have a couple different ways to do it. But the most core way is Kevin is our associate at the line. He needs a component, he can type in a request, and then it pages all the material team for him. So let's say it's me and Marty. Marty and I both get the request. Let's say I'm available. I'll say take it. When I hit that one button, it drops off Marty's device and tells Kevin, hey, Jason's taking care of this for you, and guides me to go find the best material to fulfill that request. behind the scenes, we're actually keeping tabs of things. How long is it taking? What's going on? What's kind of driving that process in terms of how long do I take to answer? I got the request, how long it's actually deliver the material to the line. All it's tracked so we can keep visibility as to what's going on from a materials perspective. Do we have the materials in the right space? Do we have them in the right order? Do we have the right team allocated to the right process, right? And so we help customers kind of migrate from a dedicated model to what we call an ambulatory model. We can have team members all across the area covering more areas because they don't have to see anything anymore. They don't have to be right there watching, like, yep, that component's low, let me go get it. And then we kind of advance that. So we start with an associate, or what we call a direct request. The next process is what we call a safety stock monitoring, where we'll actually set stock levels and go through and automatically trigger requests as soon as they drop below stock level. So maybe you have a line side inventory that's supplying the line, and the associate's picking those off that. So instead of me just staring at the rack waiting for it to empty, I can go do something else. And then when the rack gets below a certain threshold, it notifies me what to bring, where to bring it from, and where to deliver it to, all automatically. And then we have some customers who go one more level, and that's via our APIs. They use something like Mach 2. In this case, one of our customers has Mach 2. Their process, their manufacturing process is a little variable in terms of cycle times based on temperature. And they actually time it out on the finished goods side such that the material handlers bring in an empty container and picking up the full and dropping off an empty, just as the last part's going in the box, and they're sticking a label on it. That's sophisticated, but that's what you can do with an API. You can kind of control that math behind the scenes to understand, like, oh, our cycle times are varying a little bit. Let's not have the material handler wait. But the same token, let's make sure we get the empties there on time and as fast as possible and reduce footprint, because they don't have a lot of space to go through that. Now, you take all that flow, all that work, all that understanding of who's your best performer, what's going on, what are they doing? And again, we kind of created some more dashboards to kind of understand that. So this is one of our dashboards. We use a couple customers actually have this up on the floor, and it shows them what's out there for requests. This across the whole plant, but you can focus it by area. How many are in progress? What's their average response time and average fulfillment time? And we run into this a lot. A lot of customers we ask, like, how fast do you think the guys are answering your pages today? And they're like 5 minutes. I'm like, okay. And do you have a data for that? Like, no. So we go out there and we monitor in real time how fast it is and see how they go. This actually came up from one of our earlier customers. They had 3 different production areas, 3 different material handlers, 1 assigned per area. They really didn't like one of them. They thought she was kind of a pain. And so they brought us in to do analytics, or used our analytics after a week to kind of see what they should do. What they found is that Jen, that was her name, does twice the work of the other 2 material handlers, just the nature of her area. It's very component heavy. And she drove twice as far because the layout of the facility, her parts were twice as far away as the other guys. And so she was driving twice as far, doing twice the work. That's why she was sometimes difficult to deal with. So we worked with them. We actually went to a different model. We call it the ambulatory model, where they switched to all 3 material handlers, cover all 3 areas. And then diving into it even further, they found out actually once the shift starts, once it gets moving after the first hour or 2, they don't need the 3rd material handler. They put him on the cycle counting, and they pick the one based on data who doesn't do as fast as the other 2. So he cycle counts, and then he monitors the dashboard. When it gets to a certain number of open requests or response time thresholds, that triggers him to go jump back on a forklift to go help out the team. Because that's what you can do. You can optimize that labor pool. Now you actually understand what are they doing all day and what are they going through. Another one of those analytics is how fast are they responding to things. So we had a customer who's experimenting with different size teams and different allocations. We've got this customer is one who's actually splitting their team, is the hot debate right now. They've got, I think at this team, 6 material handlers, and they're thinking about we're recommending to split it into 2 groups of 3 to keep the cross drive chatter down, because we actually think it'll be faster served. What's great is you can actually do those changes and then see how fast is the team responding. So you're going to give that data-driven continuous improvement to say, yep, it's faster, it's more efficient, or we can take one out. We have one customer who likes to remove people from a resource pool just to see what's the impact to response and fulfillment times. And if it doesn't go down, he takes another one out until it does. And then he puts that one back and reassigns his team that way. A little heavy-handed in our experience, but still having that data to kind of see is that working or is it not? Yeah, this is another one of those our metrics are all put away. So a little bit. So finally, just safety stock, just one of our tools we use. We actually use it for picking. We use it for put away, or sorry, for requests. We actually have customers use it for general inventory management. A lot of you can have that control over, hey, I want an item for an area, item for a location, item for a zone, item for a building, keep different minutes and maxes, and kind of drive the fulfillment, whether that be through picking, whether it be through request. And also, if you want to control max, that's a big thing we're running into from a hazardous materials perspective, is that I only want to keep so many gallons of these parts in this area. You can kind of restrict that and it'll stop people from moving into it. Any questions on anything I covered? I know it's been kind of a lot to digest, but love to keep the train going. Great. So we are a product company. So we actually work with our partners or our customers to kind of come up with our roadmap. And this is what we deliver roughly on a quarterly basis that we go through. And a lot of that is things we hear, ideas that we have internally within the team, or customers or prospects or partners that come to us with some ideas. That we kind of gyrate our way through it and fine tune the process and deliver, right? And so we go through a couple of different steps. One is limited release. It's something that like, yep, it works. An alpha customer has approved that it works. We just let customers know, like, hey, this is something that's working, but we want to make sure that someone knows that you're basically probably the second or third customer use it. So kitting APIs are a big one for that, because we have APIs for everything. One customer really wanted API structure for it all. We created it, works really well, but we just want to be transparent in terms of how well it is. Then we get into more of the quarterly release cycle, and here's things like we're working on single sign-on. That's going out to 2 customers next week. More APIs, more analytics, new FIFO options. That was a big one we delivered about a month and a half ago, is continuing to make that FIFO experience more configurable for different items or different buildings or different work centers. And kind of leading us more into Q4, because we're almost there. I can't believe it's September already. Working a lot on FIFO validation and picking. FIFO keeps coming up from our customers, mostly in the food world. We're also hearing about it from other materials that expire. Continue to expand our analytics suite, because we love to do analytics. And then we call request escalation. Like, not all requests are created equal. If this is a safety stock fulfillment, but I still have parts, I want, this may be when we're out of parts, I want that to be at the top of the list. It's basically that ability to kind of push the lever and get those faster. And then we finally get to our under consideration. And under consideration are things that sometimes are ideas we have, sometimes are things we've heard about, sometimes we'll even have a full design for it. We're just kind of talking to people about it to get their feedback. And sometimes it's just, you know, an idea we're just curious measuring, right? So loading for us is a big one. That's basically taking our driver sign-in dock log process and driving it straight to the material handler, loading the trucks, so that they don't get off the trucks, off their high-low, to go ask, what truck do I load next? It's much more on their device that tells them, hey, Honda Marysville's in dock 3, start loading that now. It's first before Alabama, which is here early, right? Give them all that kind of management tools so they don't get off their fork truck. Cubing, loading, and planning. This is actually one where we have more of a design for it. We're just kind of fine tuning that and seeing if there's interest in kind of pursuing that. In terms of what fits on a truck and how do I want to load a truck in a very specific way. We got this both from a customer requirement, both from an automotive and consumer goods like Walmart. And we also get it from a weight perspective, and we also get it from a how do we kind of train that material handler to load that in the right specific order to validate that they loaded it. Cycle counting triggers is actually from Sarah that we really like, and that we keep running into customers who are like, what do I cycle count next? And rather than just kind of take the shotgun approach, it's much more of, hey, we keep noticing that reporting a picking error or request error for a certain component or a certain location. We're going to tell you to go cycle count that, right? Inbound dock scheduling, again, we do a lot of outbound already today, just extending that to inbound and kind of making that much more controlled process to manage your inbound dock, especially now when you're just light on team members. And then finally, allergen move restrictions. This is something we're continuing to work with a couple food customers on. It actually crosses over a lot with our hazardous material remove restrictions, and that's whether we restrict who can do moves, make put away stronger to say you can't override certain things, parts or configurations, and kind of drive that experience a little bit more to kind of continue that segregation of this product has to stay in very specific locations. It can only be handled in a very specific way, and systematize that enforcement so that no Tom, Dick, and Harry can just show up and just start messing with it and contaminating product or causing an unsafe situation. Great. Any questions? I know it's a lot to consume. That's why I'm glad Kevin recorded it. So we'll be able to share that. If anything comes up, if you want to learn more, email address is right here, info@cellatech.com. That goes actually to a couple of us at the shop, and we'll gladly take care of anything that pops up if there's anything that meets your needs. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time and the opportunity. Thank you, Kevin, for being our MC as well as being a great partner for us. Looking forward to continuing to work together and with the rest of the Plex community. That's what I think. I hand it back to you.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Jason. Thanks for those of you that joined us today. Next session is going to be Excel tips and tricks. So for those of you interested in just kind of refreshing some common upload functionality and other helpful things, interacting with data, we're gonna have some fun Excel content for you for our next session. So feel free to sign up for that, and we'll catch everyone at a later future workshop. Thank you.